The Last Dance.
Which was fantastic.
The Last Dance, if you have been living under a rock the last couple of months, a 10-hour, 10-part, whatever you want to go with, 10-part, 10-hour documentary that profiles the last championship year of the Chicago Bulls, and specifically Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen and Phil Jackson as that team.
Can't forget Rodman. Man was a bad man.
We'll get to
on
Rodman.
defense. That's another story.
But basically, this is a 10-hour journey where we go in depth in some of this footage has never been seen, where we see Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen and Dennis Rodman and Phil Jackson coaching their last championship ever, because that team was basically blown up by Jerry Krause and Jerry Reinsdorf, the owner and the team general manager afterwards. So, I mean, 10 hours worth of stuff. I mean, we could do a whole podcast just on that documentary alone.
On an episode.
On one episode.
I was going back and I started rewatching it this last week.
You resaw it.
I went back and started. I'm only back in 2 episodes.
Okay, but you saw the whole thing.
I did. I watched the whole thing at varying levels of interest because, to defend myself, I mean, I was very, very young in 1996.
Yeah.
I was not watching sports. I was like 2. But, for me, it was always just like, okay, cool. Jordan is the best basketball player of all time. I can just accept it. So there's parts of me I'm just like, cool. I know how the story ends. I know that they, I know what's going to happen.
6 rings.
Yeah. So, and I know Phil Jackson goes on to coach the Lakers, and I know that I already know this was his last season with the Bulls. So part of me was just kind of like, all right, I know what's going to happen. But we actually texted before this recording, and you were like, how big of a D-bag was Jordan in this documentary? And you said on a scale of 1 to 10. I said a 7. And you said, like, we have a lot to talk about. I think he was a justified D-bag at a 7. Because you got to think, he's got 5 rings in the last 7 years when that season starts. When you think basketball, much like now when you say, if you were to talk to somebody in Spain or, France, what do you think of basketball? What's the first one they say today? Oh, LeBron James, the thing he does. Or, you could even throw like a Steph Curry, whomever in there. In 1996, it was the Bulls. It was Jordan, is the superstar. He is basketball in the
He
world.
literally is the league at that point.
He is. I mean, there were a ton of talented players. You look at the stacked roster, you listed out the Bulls had. You had guys like Reggie Miller still out there. And I think the world of Reggie Miller. Mitch Richmond, they showed the Kings, and
yeah, they showed the Kings for like that 10 second, and it was funny because everyone on Twitter,
we
made the doc. We made the doc.
Release Down in the Valley, please.
Yeah.
Go on, ESPN. Now's the time to release it. But no, I thought the documentary was really well done, and it was very the pacing was done very well too for the 10 parts. And I found myself episode 6, episode 7 going like, yeah, I know it's getting down to the end of the season, and I know what's going to happen, but is it next Sunday? Is it next Sunday yet? I thought Jordan looked so old though when they was doing the interview parts, managing the Charlotte Hornets.
Well, that's what happens. Task when you get older. You age.
But managing the Charlotte Hornets into the ground took a really big toll on it.
Well, it was just funny. I think the biggest takeaway that I took from it was that this is a world pre-social media, pre-internet. I mean, you can make the case for a lot of people that have gotten famous in our generation. It's in large part due to social media and getting your work out there in social media. There was none of that. And Michael was there in the forefront. Literally, you could have made the argument Jordan was the most famous person on the planet.
Since he was drafted, even. I mean, even the seasons that he wasn't doing anything with the Bulls, as they put the roster around him, he was still all right, well, Jordan is greater than anybody we've ever seen play the game. I'm interested to see if any other team, because at the beginning of the series, and maybe just because it's fresh, they lay out that they gave a certain camera crew special access and none of this footage you've ever seen, and I'm wondering what other teams in any sport would you like to see a back behind the scenes? I mean, the obvious answer comes to me is the Patriots dynasty.
Oh yeah,
I'd love to see a docuseries about that and seeing Tom Brady weirdly kiss people on the lips
with his trainer,
for 14 episodes of that.
The beef between Belichick and his trainer and all that. I would love to see that.
What sent Garoppolo to the Bay Area? Was it really just a business move? Was there something else going on?
Was it a handout?
Yeah. Was it just
Kyle?
Send him to NFC? I think they would be great. I got to think the greatest show on turf, if you even want to stick with football. I think the late 90s Rams would be fun. I think, but it's also, it's easy to speculate they had the footage. But I think the reason The Last Dance was so great was because there was such this lore of even to this day, there's always the argument LeBron versus Jordan, LeBron versus Jordan. Because Jordan was so mystified, and it was the pre-social media age, we didn't have that access. And I think that's what made The Last Dance like, well, I got to see this now. I got to know, like, it's easy with social media now. We know LeBron loves tacos on Tuesday.
Yeah.
We know, and we know he's a great player. We get it, dude. But, Jordan was very, I'm Michael Jordan, whatever. There's a scene when they're in the first episode when they're going to Europe, and just the swarm of people just around them. I was like, I'm uncomfortable, and this is 20 some odd years ago. Ugh.
See, for me, like, I'm watching that, and I think one of the biggest takeaways I took from it was because he was so big, because he was the
Mr.
league.
Basketball.
I think that created two conundrums in his life. Was that one, he really had to make an effort to try and keep sanity as best he could. Like, I was talking to somebody I knew, and I was like, that's not livable. Like, he couldn't live a normal life. Like, the things that we used to do before quarantine, like go out to eat, go to movies, that's off the table. Like, he can't do that without security. And I think in one part, it was fascinating to see him finally open up and be willing to talk about how he truly felt. Because if anybody follows the league in sports in general, he's one of those athletes. Like, him and LeBron are two of those kind of athletes where it's like they don't disclose anything.
No.
Like, nothing gets out without their permission. And what I also noticed was that when he won the first 3 championships and things started to get out, like the gambling and the New Jersey casino stuff.
And the smoking and cigars.
And the media coverage of his dad dying. Like, literally, imagine somebody blaming you for your dad dying because you apparently owe the mob, like, so much money. I think it created conundrums in his life to where it didn't become fun for him anymore, and he was burnt out, and he needed to get away from basketball, which was like the only thing he loved in his life. Like, that was the one thing he cared about more than anything was basketball. And to see that poisoned, I feel like, by the media and things today, I just feel like, if they were trying to do that to him back then to get a story, imagine what they would do now, which makes what LeBron's done, in my mind, way more impressive. But it just was really fascinating to see him just, like, open up and tell people, okay, this is how I felt about that person, this person, this person. And then just, like, the shots he was taking, like, calling Krause fat and calling him short. Like, literally, the GM.
The pills you take to be short or
and
fat.
they
and
won.
stupid.
That was the crazy part. They were winning while they were all, like, disliking each other at some point in the doc.
I've said this about certain teams, and I said this about the Rams coming into last season's NFL season. I said there's a lot of personalities on that team. The second they aren't winning, that whole situation's blowing up. And look at what's happened this offseason. They're rebuilding now. So, at least in my opinion. But even, like, with Jordan, I mean, you got to think, like, he was also cut, from his basketball team in high school. He's always had I felt like he's always had a chip on his shoulder, like, oh, people are going to doubt me, people are going to doubt me. And I think it was refreshing for him to have this documentary come out and for us to see that, I don't want to say softer side of Jordan because he's not soft. That's not, the right adjective. But a more sensitive side of him, seeing him open up. I have a coworker, we always talked about it Monday morning, much like you would talk about, the Sunday night football.
Water cooler stuff. And
he's like, did you watch the last? Yeah, man, Jordan talks a lot of crap. And I'm like, when you're him, you can.
That's the thing, is, like, for him, I think he was probably the athlete that dealt with all those expectations. And he knew the burden he carried. If he would lose, oh, you can't win with one guy. See, all this super individual talent, but he can't win. And so I think all those years of him losing, like, fueled him to, like, never experience that again. And so his main philosophy was, he talks about it in the doc, he's like, I never asked somebody to do something that I didn't do. But at the same time, he told him, it's like, you can call me a tyrant because you never won anything. So you can't relate to my struggles. You're not on this level, basically. Like, it's like two middle fingers. Like, you don't know what I deal with on a daily basis. But he said, if you don't want to lead that way, you don't have to. But this is how I did it, and it was successful. So you can't really knock the guy.
6 rings, they speak for themselves.
Yeah, so. It's insane. Like, and I think the other thing I took away from it was just like, I am very surprised that Dennis Rodman was able to function on a day-to-day basis